say good morning and welcome. So glad that you're here for another episode of The Nonprofit Show. Each and every day, we show up and have an amazing conversation like the one we're having today with Sebastian Cruz. And Sebastian's here to talk to us about creating a team workflow state. So for that, some of you scratching your heads like, what the heck is this? You're going to be wowed. Sebastian and I, we've known each other now, gosh, not quite a year, but we've had some really deep, really cool conversations. So Sebastian is the founder of True Freedom, and he will share with us a little bit more about who he is and what he does. So Julia Patrick, she is the founder and CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. I am so glad that Julia asked me 3 years ago in March of 2020 to say, hey, I have this bananas idea. Would you like to show up each and every day with me to be of service and a co-host for the Nonprofit Show? I said yes, and here we are. You know, we thought it was going to be a 2-week endeavor, Sebastian, but here we are coming up on our 600th episode. I'm Jarrett Ransom, your nonprofit nerd, CEO of the Raven Group, and we are honored to have the continued support and investment of our presenting sponsors. Those of you watching, you can see their logos on the screen. Those of you listening, I'm going to give a verbal shout out to Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Fundraising Academy, Nonprofit Nerd, Your Part-Time Controller, Staffing Boutique, and Nonprofit Thought Leaders. These companies, many of them, have truly been with us for these entire 3 years, and they have leaned into, the chaos, the turmoil, everything that's gone on in the last 3 years. So please check them out. But I like to remind you, not yet, because we're going to have a fascinating conversation. If you miss any of our episodes and you want to go back and re-listen to anything, including today's conversation with Sebastian, you can find us on Roku video, YouTube, Amazon Fire TV, as well as Vimeo. And then I like to mention that we are also on podcasts. So make sure that if you're a podcast listener like I am, you go ahead and queue up the Nonprofit Show wherever you stream your channels, and you can listen to today's conversation or any of the other ones. So Sebastian, you've been waiting so patiently, and I'm just so glad to have you here in the hot seat, as we like to call it. Sebastian Cruz, founder of True Freedom. Welcome, Sebastian. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah. Well, let's start. Tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us a little bit about True Freedom. Who are you? What do you do? You know, what's your mission? And, what's your big goal?
Yeah, so I'll start out with what is flow state? And perhaps it's like being in the zone. So whether it's sports, I think we can all connect to a time, whether it was ourselves or we saw, a sports athlete be in the zone. And I'm doing like air quotes here. It's that moment where it feels easy, it feels natural, and it's actually their best performance coming through. So that is flow state in the most practical form. And how that happens with our work is where we get in the zone with our where what we're doing, we're engaged with it, and our best productivity comes through. And speaking of productivity, there's a lot of research now on flow state. And one of the quotes that I share is that according to Forbes, top executives report being 5 times more productive when in flow state.
Wow.
So, and that's a 10-year study too. So there's tons of research on this. So it's really weaving together what you love to do, the mission that lights you up, and then bringing that together with your work, which is producing value for people in exchange for money.
Love it. How did you get into this? And where did the name of your company, True Freedom, come from?
Well, it all started when I was 19 years old and I had started my own business. And what happened is that we grew very quickly. It was a marketing agency and we 11x'd our revenue in 9 months. So all of a sudden my team blew up. I had 25 full-time team members. I was the youngest person in the company, the owner of the company. And all I knew how to do at that time was just work harder, put more hours in. That's what I did. And pretty soon I found myself at 100 hours a week working. And I was proud of it too. That's the thing. I remember I post on Facebook, here's my time tracker, world. Look, I'm a man. I was proud of it. Now I facepalm myself. Like, what were you thinking? But at the time, that's all I knew.
Yeah.
So in a nutshell, my journey went from working 100 hours a week, which was agency burnout, agency overwhelm. All my team was stressed and burnt out, Two, fast forward on the second version of the business of being like agency freedom, where there was peace,
Yes.
productivity, and that journey, I nearly died in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And so that really was what I took into the True Freedom software, is what I learned on that journey.
I love that. Thank you for sharing, because I was hoping you would share a little bit more about that. If you want to read more about Sebastian's story, he's very open on his website. You can see that here, TrueFreedom.ai. So thanks for giving us a little bit of background there, Sebastian. So let's dive deep. I mean, I would say that any of our conversations you and I have had over the last several months, Sebastian, we don't really play in the shallow end. Like we just dump dive right into the deep end. And I hope we can do that here today and kind of give our viewers and listeners, a sample of just the awesomeness that you provide, and this freedom. So let's start off, as we're trying to create this workflow state for our company, for ourselves, and what that looks like. Let's start off with this first one here, which is burden business. And you kind of touched on this already, with your previous story. More growth, more stress. That sounds horrible. Talk to us about this.
Yeah, it's like that's, in a business, we want to grow, we want to, especially, a purpose-driven business. And by the way, little PSA, I only work with purpose-driven businesses. I cannot work with people who are not purpose-driven. It just doesn't work for me. So in purpose-driven world, we want more impact. We want to touch more lives and improve more lives. So that's the tough thing, is that when the organization is set up to create more stress, the more we grow, for me, it felt like I created a prison of my own design. I was like, oh, this is the goal. We're more money than ever before, more team members than ever before. But I'm like, why do I feel like a slave? That's what I felt like. I was a slave.
Right.
So, three core problems come to mind with it's a burden business. Number one is like one-on-one calls fill your schedule. Like you love your clients, you love your team, love what you do, but it's like, whoa, you look at your schedule for the week, you're like, oh, I need a lot of coffee to power through this week.
Yeah, it's exhausting to see that.
Exactly. And that's one core problem. Another core problem, these are called common problems too. So there's no judgment with this. I've lived through this. It's just like we all go through this, I feel like. Second one is, the never-ending group call. It's like, oh boy, we got another meeting here. And it just never ends. It never ends. So that's another thing. And then, as an organizational owner, leader, every time there's a meeting, I see dollar signs above everybody's head, because it's like everybody has
Yes.
an hourly rate, including me. And when
Yep.
we're all together, somebody's paying for that. And if we're not being effective, to me, it feels like taking all that value, putting it in a garbage can, taking lighter fluid, lighting on fire, hitting the match, and we're just like not getting anywhere.
Yeah.
That's the second core
I,
problem.
I see that too. I look around and I'm like, cha-ching, 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 and often these are some like high value time. And so we're talking several thousands perhaps. So I like that. I like that visual. Okay. What is the third core common challenge?
The third one is, this very seductive idea of like, oh, we're just one project manager away. Oh, we're just a director away. Oh, we're just one this away. And what happened, this was what I would always think too, like I'm only one project manager away, and then I get my weekends back, or I get my nights back. And what
Right.
happens is we have, more team is more cost and more complexity. Obviously, there's a way to do it right, but it's got to be done right. So it's like I'd find myself of like, yes, I did find the project manager, but now I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm in more meetings
Yeah.
that I pay for. I'm like, this isn't what I hoped it would be. Yeah,
Wow.
that's the third one.
Those are three. Yeah. And as we said, this burden business, identifying those three, I appreciate you bringing them up, because that to me, I can see it. I've lived it. And so now we're going to shift into how do we move from burden to freedom, right? Where we're switching out the more growth and the more ease. It was in the previous one with the burden, more stress, but now we're talking about more ease. So what does this freedom business look like?
Yeah, so there's three components of this as well.
Okay.
And these three are kind of like giving an Iron Man suit to your team, I feel like. So it's like taking your existing team don't want to we want to keep everybody in the team, but just enhancing what we can all do together, giving them an Iron Man, Iron Woman suit so you can see what matters most and then blast forward with these. So, so
Where did
these
we get this suit? I know. I'm like, that sounds great. So which closet is it in, right? Like, where do I
right.
find this?
Exactly. Yeah, and so it's the three ones are focus, flow, and genius. And I'll get into each one of these. Focus, flow, and genius.
Yeah.
So focus is each week seeing the 80-20. Maybe we've heard of the Pareto principle that like 20% of the activities produce 80% of the results.
Yeah.
I like to take it a step further and be like, what if we did the 80-20 of the 80-20? And what that equates to is the top 4%. And I see it as a circle. Like, this is all the activities. These are all the things that feel urgent. These are all the things that need to happen. But it's like, all right, what are the 20% that are in the middle that actually move the needle the most? And then within that, what is the even smaller 20% that creates all the value? And that's that top 4% of activities. So when the team can focus on their one thing each week that moves the business forward, then they start being happy and effective.
That sounds, I'm going to be honest, it sounds very like far-fetched, right? Because when I see, teams and they have a long laundry list of things to do, it's like, well, how do we get everything done if we're focusing on the 20% of the 20%? I know it's doable, but it also makes me think like, what about everything else? Are these balls being dropped or things slipping through the cracks? Like, is our business going to end? Is the community going to struggle? Because, as the nonprofit, we're here to serve the community. So I appreciate that focus, and I could see the benefit of it, but I also see how it's like, okay, how the heck do we get there, right? Like, how do we make that shift? And that to me, I think would be the most challenging, but again, it's doable. So that was one of your three. So we have focus, we have freedom, and genius, right? So take us into the next two.
Yeah, and if I can just address that real quick, because I believe
Please.
you're
Yes.
absolutely right, because I realized that I couldn't figure it out with my conscious mind. So I started
Okay.
diving, like I just could, and especially if we're in a stress state, it's like, where I feel so chaotic, like in that state. So the key was subconscious mind. So there's this quote by Dr. Bruce Lipton that says the subconscious mind is 100 million times more powerful than the conscious mind.
Wow.
And it sounds crazy, and like it is in a way, but when we think about it common sense wise, our subconscious mind is guiding our body. We didn't tell our heart to beat today. We didn't tell our cells to do all the mitosis and things today. So when we tap into the subconscious mind, and that's what I do with the weekly weekly flow state webinar, is people come in feeling level of stress, anxiety, burdened. We do the subconscious clearing process. They feel inner peace and clarity. And then from there, ask the question that comes from Gary Keller's book, The One Thing, which is what's the one thing next week that would make everything else way easier or even unnecessary? And then that tends to reveal their 80-20 to 80-20.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I have to witness to all of you. I have joined Sebastian on those calls because I wanted to experience it and really see what this was like. And they're phenomenal. So I'm glad to hear that you're still doing them, Sebastian. And for those of you that are like, okay, I want a little bit more dose of Sebastian, you can check those out, of course. Okay, so move us into then the freedom and number two.
Yep. So number one, focus. Number two, flow. So that's what
Flow.
we've been talking this whole time. So really, narrowing down to that, it's passion, purpose, and prosperity all weaving together. Passion, what do you love to do? Purpose, what is the mission that you're connected to? And with your purpose-driven organization, what's your mission within the organization as well? And then prosperity, how can you produce more value than you receive? Because then you'll always be paid more and more and more. So that's the second one, is the flow with your work.
Flow. Sorry, I called it freedom. I'm just looking for that, right? It's like, where's the freedom? That's what we all want to find. So that flow. Okay. And then the third you said, I hope I don't botch it, but I think it's genius. Is that right?
Yes, absolutely. So that's taking a look at personality profiles of what is your zone of genius. And that comes from Dr. Gay Hendricks, of looking at what's your zone of genius. And really there's four quadrants. And like, what are you not good at? What are you kind of good at? What are you good at and people want to pay you for? Your zone of excellence. But then what can you be truly best in the world at? Because you love it, it lights you up. That's your zone of genius. So the whole concept of the zone of genius is using different personality profiles to get a clear picture of, all right, this is the role where you produce maximum value in the least amount of time.
Right.
Mhm.
I love that. And when you and I connected, and I think, we just automatically started speaking the same language.
Yeah.
I too have done some workshops on finding and living in your zone of genius. I actually did it for Bloomerang, our sponsor here. And, there's two questions that I like to ask, and it's, what do you love to do? And what are you great at doing? And I think those two questions, maybe they could be different answers. It's not always the same. But that will help all of us, others, myself included, to kind of find, like, what is that? How do we find our genius zone? So thanks for sharing that. And so, each of these, the burden business, the freedom business, you just shared, three core elements in each of them. And they're all just fascinating to me. And really what we're looking for and working towards, from this freedom business is truly that flow state that you just mentioned, that productivity. So let's dive deep into the productivity, Sebastian. Like, what else can you share with us about this? And I would love any success stories, because you had shared earlier,
Mm.
you only, and that's a big word, right? Like, that's a
Mhm.
powerful word,
Yeah.
work with purpose-driven businesses. So talk to us about productivity.
Yeah, absolutely. So one case study that comes to mind is a friend of mine, Dan Russell, we started having conversations about this early on, like way before it was even developed with the robust features that it has now. And through those conversations, he took his agency, at a marketing agency, where he was working 50 hours plus a week, brought that down to 10 hours a week, where he was in his zone of genius. And those 10 hours were like golden hours, like peak productivity. And that doubled his profit in 90 days. So 50 hours to 10 hours, double his profit, 90 days. And that gave him time to finally do what he truly loved, which his true calling was coming through. It was knocking at his door, at his mind's door, saying, write this book. So
Wow.
that gave him time to write his book.
And did that come through his subconscious mind?
I mean, I think it maybe started there and then it got pretty loud. It was like, all right, buddy, you got to do something.
Yeah, that knock just got louder and louder and
Yeah.
louder, as it often does, right? It's like,
Yeah.
and I know I'm guilty of that too. I feel something, whether it's intuition or this gut nudge, which, to me, I think that's intuition. And it's like, no, that's, I'm not going to pay attention to that. And I just kind of like push it away. And then it comes up and it comes up and it comes up in a bigger, louder kind of way. So, finding that. One of the questions I'd like to ask you, because our viewers truly are nonprofit leaders, people of service, people that, are truly passion and purpose driven. So how do we get into this true productivity state, and how do we stay there? Right? Like, how do we stay there as a team? Because I know, Sebastian, you've done so much work on this, and I'm curious if you also find yourself slipping into that burden business. Like, do you find yourself, there's days or weeks or months where you're like, I'm seeing too many one-on-ones on my calendar. I'm seeing too many group calls that are going too long. Like, do you find yourself also slipping into this sometimes?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's
Okay.
like it's a moment of like keeping the guardrails on. And that's what I started developing, not me personally, but my team. I started having my team develop the software was for my freedom clients that I was guiding through. And I was like, oh, wouldn't it be easier if we just had guardrails here or we had, a visual thing here to help keep it because, the reality is we can get so in the caught up in whatever we're doing and pulled in so many different directions where maybe it takes a while to be like, oh my gosh, like I got pulled off my center. So really what the operating system is designed to do, it's coaching systems and software. It's designed to keep us in the pocket, keep us in that, inner peace place. And anytime we get off just a little bit, it can, guide us back in.
It's not a shockwave, right? It's not like,
Right.
yeah.
Right.
So tell
Gentle
us.
guidance.
Yeah, gentle guidance. I like that. So
Yeah.
tell us about, you've mentioned the software, you've mentioned that you've built this. Tell us a little bit about that and how that works for individuals, for companies, nonprofits. How does the system work?
Yeah. So the core philosophy behind it is I believe we're born to do what we love. It's my core
Yeah.
belief. I believe we're born to do what we love. So true freedom to me means creating wealth with what you love to do while having the schedule that lights you up.
Yeah.
And when it comes to an organization, I want that for everybody. Because when we're working in our zone of genius, then we can create more impact. So the software, the mission of the software is to free 1 billion people by 2050.
Yeah.
And so everything is every decision is evaluated. Is that getting us closer to that or not? And the reason why we're doing that is because, I believe when we have extra time and extra money, it's more natural for us to give to the causes that light us up. Maybe it's children, maybe it's infrastructure, maybe it's the ocean, animals. And with the United Nations 17 global goals, I figure if we free 1 billion people by 2050, then that's people that are contributing in some way, whatever way is great. And then that'll give us 50 years of contributing, and I believe we can solve those 17 global goals by 2100.
Wow.
And that'll usher in a new reality of global abundance
Hmm.
where we have a prosperous planet. And at that time, if Elon Musk continues at his pace, like we'll be a multi-planetary species at some point. And at that point, we'll be able to just simply evaluate, like, is our planet a prosperous planet or is it like a in-debt planet? And I would like to see us be a prosperous planet.
Prosperous. Yeah. No, this is so fascinating to me. And I will share my personal why is freedom, flexibility, and
Yeah.
travel. Right. And so to find a way to live my life, yeah, that allows me the freedom and the flexibility. Travel is a huge thing for me. I share often, and I know you've heard about him, but my son who will be 12. And so, really living a life, working in my zone of genius, nerding out with nonprofits in a way that is impactful for the global community, but also fulfilling to me. And I love that because and I also joke and said, okay, in third grade, when my teacher always said, stop talking, Jarrett, stop talking, Jarrett, I'm going to write your name on the board. It's like, well, hello, third grade teacher, I now get paid to talk. So clearly my zone of genius was shining through.
Yeah.
Granted, it showed up in my report card for talking too much, right? But here I am doing what I love to do. It does not feel like work. There are moments that are a little bit too, burdensome. There are
Yeah.
moments when those group calls go forever. There are weeks when I look at my calendar and I'm like, there's a lot of one-on-one calls. Everything that you just said is like those core, red flags. But really finding and living in my zone of genius has just changed. It's changed my world. So I commend you truly, Sebastian, because that's a big goal. It's a big global goal. And I think, it's something that many of us are interested in. One of the things I like to share is, a lot of nonprofits, they pride themselves, as you just did, on like, I worked 100 hours this week, right? Like we pride ourselves on not taking vacations. We pride ourselves on taking our work home. We pride ourselves on, working through the weekends with our clients or community, whatever that might look like. But really what I'm learning from our conversation is at some point that's going to catch up to us. And just like it did to you with your marketing agency when you were 19, I don't know how long that stretch was, but this is serious. When we talk about mental health, we talk about self-care. This conversation today, I think, just like really focuses in on where we can focus to be more productive and efficient.
Absolutely. And I feel like that's a really relevant topic for all of us in the purpose-driven space because it's so easy to burn ourselves out because we exist to help fulfill this mission that we're connected to.
Right.
And that's been a really big lesson for me that's taken more time than I would have liked. But it's like, okay, if my cup is empty, the amount that I give is just like drops. And maybe I show up, but the quality of that is just drops. Whether if I take the time to fill up my cup and it's overflowing, then the energy that I give is at a totally different level. And I feel like we as purpose driven people, we've got to have a higher level of skill with that because we're so connected to our passion. Like somebody who's just doing it for the money, and points in my career, I was just doing it for the money. So it's like if there was no this, I wouldn't be doing it. So it was
Right.
easy to disconnect but when our passion, purpose, prosperity is together, I feel like it requires a higher level of distinction for us filling up our cup.
Yeah, no, you're so right. And I myself have found myself, where it's like I am exhausted. I need to take a break and finding that time. Many of us in the nonprofit sector and passion, purpose driven as well, it is I feel like we're always on the front lines. I feel like we're always in some kind of a crisis mode or trauma. And so it really does take a toll on us. But, one of the things that I do say, Sebastian, truly is, I am the nonprofit nerd 24/7, and there's not a turnoff switch, like I am on all the time thinking of community, thinking of missions and impact and how I can change the world and help other people change the world. So I appreciate this conversation. I think it's very timely, and just looking more for just to consume on this conversation so that we can get into that flow state. And I think that's really what we all want. I have Sebastian's slide up here so you can take a look at his company name and his website. Again, it's TrueFreedom.ai. If you would, Sebastian, with just a little bit of remaining time, would you share with us a little bit about your calls and if those are still open to the public and kind of what that looks like?
Yeah, so right now, our whole goal is to help teams work in flow state.
Mhm.
But that's a lot of teams. We've got interest from big corporate teams, small businesses, everything in between. And so what we're doing right now is focusing specifically on purpose-driven agencies. And so if you're listening to this and that feels like a fit for you, you can go to the website and you can take a free flow state quiz, which will guide you through seeing the value of flow state for your organization, what that means in actual dollars. And then you can schedule a demo if you'd like, and if that resonates with you. So that's one thing. And really the last thing I'd just feel to share from my heart is that, like, where times have changed so much. And when I was starting on business, 11 years ago, passion was a dirty word. Passion was a word that, was weak. I'd be looked down on. I'm like, oh, business isn't your passion. But now times have changed. And so everybody here who's followed their passion with their career, with their business, it's our time. And now, go figure, the productivity that the traditional business world always sought for is linked to your passion. So follow your passion, do what you love, create value, and let's solve these global goals together, because I can't do it alone, but we can do it together.
Let's do it. I'm all in. Sign me up. Thank you so much. Yeah, this is amazing. TrueFreedom.ai. Please do check out Sebastian. And if you can join in on one of those calls that he shared, I highly recommend it. It's really cool to be a part of that. So thank you so much, Sebastian. And we, of course, want to recognize us as the co-hosts. Those of you that might be watching and listening: Julia Patrick, Jarrett Ransom. I'm your nonprofit nerd. Honored to have this conversation with you, Sebastian. Thanks to our presenting sponsors that keep these conversations going and growing. And we're just so honored to be able to have these unscripted, very organic, natural conversations like the one that we just had with you, Sebastian. So again, thank you to Bloomerang. Thank you to American Nonprofit Academy, Fundraising Academy, Nonprofit Nerd, Your Part-Time Controller, Staffing Boutique, and the Nonprofit Thought Leader. Each and every day we wake up, and this is one of the things I'll say, is for me, my flow state includes the Nonprofit Show. It includes waking up, having these high-level conversations with amazing thought leaders like yourself. We have a great lineup this week. We have a great lineup next week. So please do make sure that you tune in and join us. Sebastian, thank you. I just have to say thanks again for spending your valuable time, cha-ching, cha-ching, and and your expertise with us, because I know that time is money, and you're just someone that I really enjoy, having a conversation with. Every time we end a conversation, I feel like my energy and my vibration has raised, as opposed to when I've entered the conversation with you. So thank you, my friend.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. And it was a blast.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks for all the good work you do. Thanks for all the great work that everyone who's watching and listening does. Please, please stay well so you can do well. And we'll see you back here tomorrow.